Okay, I get questions about how I do these drawings on my iPad, so I'm going to attempt a little tutorial here. I don't know how far we'll get into this. Maybe I'll do this in several parts. I don't know. So anyway, here's my iPad. It's just your, there we are, deadly bubonic plague. Keep out. Unlock it. I use an app for all my drawing on here called ArtStudio. Let's see if I can. There you go, right there, ArtStudio. It's a very inexpensive app. I think it cost me about $5. So we start it up, and the first thing we do is there's a little arrow in the corner here. When you touch the arrow, it brings up your main selection of commands. And this one here, when you touch it, brings up a number of it brings up a menu bar. I want to create a new image, so I hit this button that says New Image. Create New. Now it gives me some choices. I use the standard template that it has here, which indicates a size of the page. And then ArtStudio uses layers, like similar to Photoshop. But it has a very limited number of layers. It's limited to 6 layers. I select this option here that gives me a white base layer and plus a transparent layer on top of that. So that's what this option gives me. And I click OK. And now we're good to go. Again, I go to the arrow. Now this is the layer button. So this shows me what we have in the way of layers. Here, this indicates my base layer, which I rarely touch, but it just gives a white foundation for me to work on. And then here's a transparent layer on top of that, which will be the first layer that I draw with. ArtStudio, it takes a little getting used to, because the good and the bad of it is that it's very simple. It's like a very dumbed down Photoshop. So you sometimes have to go through a number of steps to do things that you could do with Photoshop at just a click of a button. Now I'm going back to here. I'm going to click this button that says Import. I'm going to draw, I've been doing a series of drawings of Scooby-Doo characters. And we're down to, we've got all the main characters done. Now I'm going to do this, this pretty annoying character called Scrappy-Doo. And in order to do that, I'm not that familiar with the character. I've seen him on TV, but I've never drawn him before. So typically when I'm doing these popular culture characters, I go online, I find some reference of the character that I can draw from. So I found a drawing of Scrappy-Doo. I downloaded that image of Scrappy-Doo to my iPad. It's in my photo file. So I can I'm going to hit the import button from Camera Roll. That's where all my photos and images are saved on my iPad. So when I select that, it gives me the option to look through all the photos I have on my iPad. And here I can scroll through all the photos. Now earlier, I saved this image of Scrappy-Doo. So now I'm going to touch that, and that brings that image of Scrappy-Doo into my ArtStudio image. So when I click on the layers button again, we'll now see, now I have 3 layers, because when it imported Scrappy-Doo, it imported it into a new separate layer. I don't want him sitting, I just want him here so I can take a look at him. But I don't want him sitting in the middle of the page. So what I do now is when I click on that layer, it brings up a palette of choices here. I'm going to hit this button called Transform, and that gives me other options. I can move, scale, rotate, or various combinations of this image. What I want to do is I want to move it and scale it, or change the size of it, because I want him out of my way so I can do my drawing. Now I can make him bigger, smaller, and I can move him around. What I want to do is I want to move him up to this corner just to get him out of the way, but have him handy. And I hit this button that says Apply, and he's now in the corner. You see he's blocked here by this menu bar, but when I hit this arrow button in the corner, that goes away. So he's there where I can use him. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but the layer that Scrappy-Doo is on is sort of highlighted with an orange border. That means that's the active layer. I don't want that to be active. I want this transparent layer to be active, so when I touch that, now that's the active layer. So we're going to start doing a little sketch on that. Here, this indicator in the far left corner gives me my drawing tools. When I touch that, that gives me options of a number of drawing tools to select from. There's a pencil, there's a paint tool, there's a paint brush, here's a spray can, a couple of more esoteric things. Here's a blending tool, here's a paint can. A lot of the tools that you would find familiar if you've used Photoshop. For now, all I want is your basic pencil. So I select pencil. And this gives us our color palette, this button here. So if we touch that, that gives us all these colors to choose from. These are basic colors. We can also create blends however we want. I'll show you that a little later. For now, I want to use any color except for black, because this is going to be a very rough sketch and I want to distinguish it from the final sketch that we'll be arriving at. So let me hit this green button, and when I hit this again, that goes away. Now let's start doing our little drawing. Scrappy-Doo. This series of Scooby-Doo characters, I'm actually keeping the drawings very loose, and so I'm not doing a lot of fiddling with them. I'm pretty much trying to keep them to the first pass on the page. So let me start with his nose. For some reason, these drawings of Scooby-Doo characters have been coming out kind of somber looking, maybe even sinister, so I'm going to stay with that look for this annoying character here. Let's see here. See, I'm not making an attempt to duplicate what's up here. I want to do my own take on this thing. But at the same time, you have to leave the character so he's recognizable. So you have to stick with a lot of the main elements of the character. Now, he's got a sort of a dog collar thing. Here's his little. See, when I click that, that toggles that bar to get it out of the way. Something is wrong here. I didn't really make his snout the way it's supposed to be. It's sort of, it needs to be extended out from his face. So let me move that. Okay, I'm going to go back to this selection bar here. Now the tool I'm going to choose is this Marquee Tool. It's above the pencil tool. When I touch that, that gives me more options here. This is a lasso. This gives me sort of a free-form selection tool. Now I can draw with that, but my drawing will be a marquee that I can use to alter what I've got down here. So I'm going to draw, I'm going to lasso his snout here. Okay, that part of the drawing is enclosed in that lasso. Now, I'm going to go back to the layer indicator. There's our layer. I've got to touch that again. I've got to touch the transform button again. And now I'm going to move that part of the drawing. Only that part of the drawing will move because that is surrounded by the lasso. That's the only active part of the drawing at this moment. So move. And I can move it. See? Move them all around. Well, I'm just going to move it out here. Just a short distance. But that sort of gets him more in line with what the character actually looks like. And we'll hit the apply button. And that's applied. The lasso is still active, so now I've got to deactivate that. To do that, I have to touch the marquee button again. Touch it there. And now I have to hit this button that says deselect. Once I do that, then the lasso is gone. See, that's sort of cumbersome, but you have to, when you familiarize yourself with the tools, eventually it gets to be an automatic, more automatic than it might be. There's sort of a learning curve to this, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Okay. So here's our drawing. Scrappy-Doo. He's still not quite there. Let's see. This is an eraser tool. Let me erase this part of his mouth. And then I go back to my pencil. And now let's see here. Put that there. His mouth isn't, has got sort of a crook in it. This is all, it's going to be all right, but I don't know. It's a little off. But I'll be cleaning that up when I go to the next layer. Of course, this character has like an oversized head and a little tiny body. He's like this tough, it's called Scrappy-Doo. He's kind of a scrappy sort of a character. Okay, so I'm going to consider this a rough layer. I'm going to go back to the layer menu. The layer that I'm working on is still selected. This bar down here, this is a slider bar. And I can change the opacity of the line that I have been drawing on. If I pull that back, the line becomes very transparent, or if I move it halfway, it's semi-transparent, all the way up to solid. I want it to be faded out so I can use it as a guide for the next layer that I work on. Now when I tap this layer again, it comes up with the options. Now I'm going to select Add New Layer. Okay, when I touch that, suddenly a new layer pops up, and that new layer is the active layer. Okay, when I touch that, then that palette goes away. Now I've got a whole new layer to work on. But this line, which is also on a transparent layer, is now underneath the new layer that I've got. Now I want to work with a black line, so I'm going to go back to my palette tool. I'm now going to select black as my color. The pencil is still active. I'm going to get this out of the way. I'm even going to get, now let's see here. Now I'm going to sort of use that as my base guide, but now I'm going to get a little more, try to get the character more in line with what I think he should be. Okay, so now I think we'll put his nose out here. See, now we're drawing in a black line. got this sort of lower part of his jaw that comes out here that I don't think Scooby-Doo has. And this is sort of, well, it's sort of like a mutated version of Scooby-Doo. His face is sort of, his head is sort of compacted, and his body is tiny, sort of the opposite of the way Scooby-Doo is built. Here is eyebrows. This series of drawings I'm keeping fairly loose, as I mentioned, so I'm not too concerned about getting the line work precise. Maybe on another tutorial I'll show you how I can work with a more precise line. And let's see, his head goes something like so. Now his collar actually sort of curves upward, not downward, because we're working with, he's got, for a small character, he's got sort of a large chest. He's sort of puffed up. He's like a very aggressive character, so that sort of helps define his character, to have this puffed up chest. Look at that. Get that in there. Here's a little trick. This corner up here, the very top left corner of the iPad in this program. If I tap that, it's the undo button. If I tap that, the last line that I drew disappears. Did you catch? I don't think you caught that. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get a little wider shot here. Okay. There are a number of undos. If I tap that, the last line I drew disappears. Then the line before that disappears. Look, they're all disappearing. Oh, my great work. It's disappearing. No, no! But if I tap the opposite corner up here, those lines come back. Very handy tool. Sometimes I think I rely on it too much. Okay, let's get our pencil back. Let's see what this guy's got going on for ears. Okay, now, not the greatest drawing I've ever done, but for demonstration purposes, this will work out all right. Okay, here's our layers. Now, this layer, as you'll recall, this is the first layer. This is the first layer that we worked on. That has the green line on it. You notice that to the right of each of these layers, there's a little eyeball icon. I don't know if you can see that. Look, look. Look, there's eyeballs next to those layers. Now, if I poke these eyeballs, those eyeballs are going to close. And the layer that they're associated with will be invisible. So I want to get rid of this green layer. I don't want to be looking at it right now, so I'm going to tap that. The eyeball is X'd out and the green line is gone. Okay. So now we got that. And as a matter of fact, let's get rid of this little Scooby-Doo thing up here in the corner. Here's the layer that it's on. You'll notice in the little schematic of the layer, it actually shows you, it's a little tiny miniature version of it, shows you what's in that layer. You can see the little picture of Scrappy-Doo up there that I imported. We don't want to see that right now, so I'm going to poke that eye out, and he's gone. Okay, so now all we have is this little drawing. Okay. Now we're going to introduce a brand new layer, and I want it to be underneath this line work. I'm going to be working underneath the line work. So what I'm going to do is I go down to the very base layer. I'm going to touch it. I'm going to tap it again. It'll bring this up. I'm going to click Add New Layer. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers in use of my maximum of 6 layers. This is going to be my first color layer. Let me just bring back Scrappy so I can remind myself of what his color palette is. He's sort of a faded beige, maybe a heavy beige color or a faded brown color. Okay, get rid of him. Let's go to our color palette. Well, the closest we have on here is, I would say, this brown color. So let's select that. If I select that again, it brings this thing up. This shows a whole range of lights and darks related to that base color. And here's sliders. I can make adjustments down here. So any place that I tap on here will give me that variation of that color. So I want him to be, that color, only lighter, and maybe with a little bit of gray mixed in. So I'll say somewhere around here. I'll tap that, and now this is the color that we've got. This is the color we started with. This is the color we started with, and here's the color that we have now. I can move that around to get whatever variation I want. And that looks okay right there. So if I tap anywhere on the page, that will disappear. But now that's the color that we're working with. Okay, let's go back to our drawing tool. I'm not going to be coloring him in with a pencil. I want to use some sort of a brush. Now I like this tool here. It's the icon is kind of odd. It looks like a pencil, but it looks like there's paint coming out of the pencil. I don't know what they call it, but I kind of like working with it. It gives me sort of a paintbrushy stroke. It has this sort of wet paint quality to it. Now, up here at the top of the screen, you'll see 2 indicators here. This this shows how opaque the line is that I'm going to be working with this brush tool. For now, I'm going to slide this all the way up so it's pretty opaque. And this gives me the width of the line that I am working with. You'll notice as I slide it, it gives a little indicator here of the size of brush that I'm going to be working with. And since I'm going to be covering broad strokes here, let's make it pretty wide. Okay, let's get this thing out of the way. Now of course, my favorite paintbrush is my finger. I used to use a stylus with the iPad here, but I abandoned it, and I found that using your finger there's nothing more immediate. Any kind of stylus is really just putting an extra. You're just removing yourself from the drawing process. So I've come to really like to use my finger. Okay. So we're going to color him in. Look at that. Very broad strokes. And if this was an actual paintbrush, I would be like one of these painters that tends to throw paint around a lot. And so I'm going to do that with this drawing as well. Now, one quality of this particular painting tool that I'm using is it allows you to smear the paint around. Let's bring it back. that tends to go into effect if the paintbrush isn't absolutely opaque. Let's make it less opaque. So now, look, it picks up some of this white color and brings it into the color here. But that doesn't look so great, so let's use that undo button that I showed to you. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, we're back to that. Okay. His nose, I think, is mostly black, but let's put an underlying color under that. What's going to be black? Now let's try blue. Our variation on blue will make it sort of a gray, dark gray blue. Okay, and since the nose is a little bit smaller, let's bring down the size of our brush somewhat. Here we are. That's sort of a very dull, or not very dark blue. That's because I made it fairly opaque, fairly translucent. Let's make it a little more opaque, go back over it again. Now you see, once it's opaque, the color becomes darker. Okay, his dog collar, I think, was sort of some sort of a green thing. Let's pick a green. That's, my recollection is it's something like that. Okay. Let's get this out of the way. All right. There's our green color. Okay, these are very flat. These colors are now very flat. And I like to model these colors somewhat. So let's bring our tools back. Here is an eyedropper tool. So when I select that, and just like in Photoshop, if I use the eyedropper to tap on a color, you see right now we've got this green color that's active. You can see the swatch down here that's indicated. That shows us what color is active. But when I use the eyedropper tool, and I tap any of this brown color up here, what did I do wrong? Eyedropper, tap, there we go. Now the swatch is turned to this brown color. It's picked up this brown color. Okay. Let's touch the swatch indicator. Okay, this, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little orange border that indicates which swatch is active. So I need to go to that, touch that. Now at the top, this bar up here shows what the original color of the swatch is, but next to it, it shows what is, it's the custom color that I've arrived at. When I touch there, now all of a sudden our choices of colors have gone to this brown palette. The target is the exact color that I'm working with, but then you've got all these gradations around it. So what I want to do is I want to work with a color that is, it's in the same family as the color I've selected, but I need something lighter to use it to highlight my character. So let's move this over here. Yeah, that's okay. So now this is the color that I'm now working with. It's a variation on the base color. Okay, we still have our tool activated, so that's good. Let's say our light is coming from, well, we'll say that the light is coming from this side, from this corner. So, of course, the surfaces, any of the surfaces of this character that would be catching light will be highlighted. So maybe his forehead will be highlighted. The top of his snout would probably be highlighted. The edge of his ears. He's got sort of this roundish snout, so let's do that. Maybe the top of his chest since he's got this sort of protruding chest. Little bit hidden here. Maybe the top of his cheek. You know, his cheek would be sort of roundish, so that would catch some light. That's okay for now. Okay, let's go back. Let's take the eyedropper and go back to this brown color. Okay. Now we go back to take that step again. Now we're going to go through the same thing that we did before. But now I want a darker version of it because we're going to be doing some shading. So this is our base color targeted right here. But now we're going to drag this down to something darker. A darker version of that color. Okay. Now I'm going to take my trusty finger, and now we're going to do the shadows that are on the underside of this figure. Look at that shadow. That part of his snout would be in shadow. Maybe show a little indication of that down here. The underside of his ear. This edge of his ear. He's got this brow, so maybe underneath his brow there would be a little bit dark. Maybe the underside of his nose, I don't know. And this, and the part of his chin. The width of the brush that I'm using is a little bit thick, so I want to narrow that down to get a little bit more fine detail in. So we bring that up. This top bar here shows us how wide the brush is. Let's make it a smaller brush. Okay. Oops. All right. Now we can use that smaller brush to do this thing under his eye there. Maybe that part of his mouth. Let's see, his eye would be inset here a little bit. So we'll do that. I guess there would be a little bit of shadow under this thing that's hanging up under his chin. And maybe a little bit under the dog collar. All right. Now, we can also use this to blend things around a little bit, because this particular brush has sort of a wet paint quality to it. It works better when you are using it in a somewhat opaque, translucent fashion. So let's slide this thing down here to about midway. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Okay, get rid of that. Now we can use this to blend colors. Look at that. So we can blend things up here. Cool, man. Here we can even blend this, and we can smear this blue around to cover up some of that brown that we got on his nose. Blend this here. Actually, I sort of like being able to see these broad brush strokes, so I'm actually sort of modeling this more than I normally would for this, the demonstration purposes here. But I can live with it. Okay, and let's smear this color on his collar a little bit to cover up the brown. Okay, Scrappy's looking a little, let's smear that a little bit. Okay, he's starting to shape up. I'm feeling like this is running pretty long, so I want to bring this to a conclusion. Down here we have, I don't know if you can see, but in the little thing here, there are actually two swatches. You can see it looks like one sitting on top of the other. If I tap that, if I tap this button that says swap, those two colors will swap. The brown is active, but there's a white one underneath it. If I swap it, now the white is on top. Now I can draw with white color. And I can change that white to any color I want, but the default just happens to be white, which happens to be what I need at this moment. Okay, let's get these tools out of the way. Now we're going to color his eyeballs, which are white, just why I need white. Well, let me show you this. On the iPad, you can pinch and spread the image on the screen. I haven't used that yet on this, but it's a really vital part of drawing on here. I want to focus on this eye, so when you use two fingers on the screen and spread, you can get in close, see? See how that works? Nice. Okay. Now we're going to use our brush. When I use one finger, it's the brush that's active, so that's just sort of smearing things around. If I want a real white eyeball, then I need to make this less opaque. That gives me a good solid white. Now, see, I can move that around. Clever, aren't they? Okay, I can make that good and white. And when I use, here's a shortcut, when I tap the screen with 3 fingers, it brings up this very basic menu. There's one that says Fit Image to Screen. I tap that, and it brings the picture back, so it's just filling the screen. Okay, now we have Scrappy Doo, and he has white eyeballs. Let's color in that little tag under his neck. Let's select just your basic yellow. Okay, now we've got the yellow swatch. Look, now we have a yellow swatch and a brown swatch. But the yellow is the active one. Okay, let's bring this up. Let's color this in yellow. This thing here needs to be yellow too, but it's very narrow, so let's make our brush a little narrower. There's that. 3-finger tap, fit image to screen. His nose should, his nose is actually black, but I don't like to make it solid black. That's why I gave that underlying blue color. So let's tap black. Actually, when I'm coloring, I very rarely actually use black. But I'll get into that another time. For now, we'll make it black. Okay, I think we'll make the brush a little bigger. Tap the brush tool, bring this up. Now we're going to sort of put some black in there. And 3-finger tap, fit image to screen. We'll look at that. Let's color in those eyeballs a little bit, why don't we? We're still got black going on. Okay. Man, he's starting to look like a cartoon character. The only thing that I would color in now is the inside of his ear, which should be sort of a flesh color. To get flesh, I generally tap. I generally choose this orange color. Bring up the palette, get a very pale version of that orange color. Okay, bring this up, color it in. Put it over there. And we're golden. Then there's also an eraser tool. Let's use the eraser to clean up some of this little, these little stray things that are going on around here. Yeah. See, I can use the undo to undo the eraser too. I tend not to like to make my brushwork too neat, but let's not go overboard with it. Let's just bring it in under control a little bit. Fit image to screen. And They're sort of a very quick, scrappy do. Now, there's some other coloring techniques that I didn't really get into here, and would like to. So I'll probably want to be doing another one of these sometime soon. But for now, at least we got something that looks like something. In the corner here, we bring up our tools. This one here, this little thing here, is what I would choose to bring up this basic toolbar, and I would hit the Save button. When I hit Save, it brings up this thing that asks me, it gives a default name, which is just a bunch of numbers, but we don't want to just give it numbers. We want to come up with a name for it. So I tap that thing to activate that box. I clear out those numbers. I will call this thing. Here the keyboard comes up, so I can call it something of my choice. I'll call it Scrappy. SCRAPPY. Click Save. It's been saved. And we have this beautiful, beautiful picture of that annoying character, Scrappy Doo. So, that's all, folks. Bye.